He caught her wrist in the dark and whispered something that made her stop fighting. Why would a stranger say that before letting go? Her breath hitched as the wood beam pressed cold against her back, the smell of dust and old hay thick in the air. His hand was firm, not rough, just enough to keep her still. Outside, a horse snorted, and the wind rattled loose boards. "Once I touch you," he murmured, voice low, steady. "There's no turning back." Then he let go, and somehow that made it worse, because now he had to decide what he meant and why he chose her. "Stay with me. This story doesn't unfold the way you think." The stagecoach came in slow, wheels grinding against the hard-packed road like they had something to complain about. Dry Creek Ridge didn't get many arrivals this time of year. Too hot, too dry. The kind of place folks passed through unless they had no better choice. The wind picked up just as the horses pulled to a stop, dragging a curtain of red dust across the main street. It slapped against the old wooden signs, rattled loose shutters, and found its way into every open mouth and tired eye. A few men leaned back in their chairs under the saloon porch, hats tipped low, watching without moving much. Watching was about all anyone had energy for. The coach door creaked open. Lila Mae Carter stepped down carefully, one hand gripping the rail, the other holding a small cloth bag that didn't look like it carried much of anything. Her boots touched the ground, and the dust settled around her ankles like it had been waiting. Her dress had once been blue. Now it was something closer to gray, worn thin along the hem. A scarf sat loose over her hair, not quite keeping the sun off her face. There were lines there that didn't belong to someone her age. Lines that came from long roads and longer silences. No one said hello. A man near the porch shifted, spat into the dirt, and said just loud enough, "Widow, I'd guess." Another voice answered, "Looks it." No one told them to lower their voices. Lila didn't turn. She adjusted her grip on the bag and walked forward, chin level, like she'd done it 100 times before in 100 towns just like this. Still, there was a moment, small enough most wouldn't catch it, when her eyes moved across the street and paused, as if measuring something she hadn't decided on yet. That was when she saw him. Colt Mercer stood under the narrow shade of the lumber shop porch, one shoulder resting against a post. His sleeves were rolled, forearms dusted with fine sawdust that clung to sweat. A hammer hung loose in one hand. He hadn't moved since the coach arrived. He wasn't smiling, wasn't frowning either, just watching. Their eyes met across the street. Not long. Just enough for the noise of the place, the horses, the murmurs, the wind, felt like it dropped a step behind. Then Lila looked away first. She crossed past the saloon, boots tapping dry against the boards, and slipped around the back where the alley narrowed between a leaning fence and a row of empty stalls. The smell of hay and old leather hung low in the shade. It was quieter there. Cooler too if you stood still long enough. She didn't see him follow, not until a hand closed around her wrist. Firm, not rough, but enough to stop her cold. Lila jerked back, breath catching sharp in her throat, the cloth bag slipping halfway from her fingers. Her free hand came up fast, ready to fight if it had to. "Easy." The voice was low, close. Colt stood in the shadow beside her, close enough she could see the line of dust along his jaw, the steady set of his mouth. His grip didn't tighten, didn't pull her closer, just held. Her pulse thudded once, twice. "Let go," she said, not loud, but not weak either. For a second he didn't. Then he leaned just a little, enough that his words didn't carry past the stall. "Once I touch you," he said, voice even, like he was stating something already decided. "There's no turning back." The words sat there between them. Strange. Out of place. Lila yanked her wrist free, Stepping back hard enough, her shoulder brushed the wooden beam behind her. Her breath came quicker now, eyes sharp, searching his face for something. Threat, warning, maybe even a hint of a joke. There was none. Colt straightened, letting his hand fall to his side like it hadn't done anything worth mentioning. He gave a small nod, almost polite, then stepped back into the light spilling in from the alley. Just like that, the moment was over. He walked past her without another word, boots heavy against the dirt, heading back toward the main street. Lila stayed where she was. She looked down at her wrist. There was no mark. Still, the skin felt warm, like the heat had settled there and decided not to leave. From the front of the saloon, laughter broke out at something she couldn't hear. A chair scraped. Someone called for another drink. The town went on like nothing had happened. Lila picked up her bag, adjusted the scarf at her neck, and stepped back into the light. She didn't look toward the lumber porch again. But she felt it. The weight of a place that had already made up its mind. And somewhere in that weight, the memory of a hand that hadn't held her long, but hadn't felt like it meant to let go. The dust kept moving, slow and steady, across Dry Creek Ridge. By morning, the wind had settled some, but the heat came early. It pressed down on the rooftops, crept through the cracks in the boarding house walls, and settled into the thin mattress where Lila had slept without really resting. The room was narrow. A small iron bed, a chipped wash basin, and a window that looked out over the alley where stray dogs picked through scraps. Someone had left a tin cup on the sill. It still smelled faintly of yesterday's coffee. Lila sat on the edge of the bed, lacing her boots. Her dress hung on a nail by the door, brushed as clean as she could manage. Before putting it on, she reached into the lining and felt along the seam until her fingers found it. The book. Small, worn leather. Edges softened by use. She slid it out just enough to see the first page. Numbers. Dates. Careful writing that didn't belong to her hand. She held it there for a second longer, then tucked it back where it had been, pressing the seam flat like it had never been opened. Downstairs, the smell of frying salt pork drifted up through the floorboards. Lila stepped out into the street not long after. The town looked the same as it had the day before. Men at the porch, horses tied to rails, the same eyes, watching just long enough before pretending not to. She crossed to the general store. The bell over the door gave a tired jingle when she pushed inside. It was cooler there. Not by much, but enough. Shelves lined with flour sacks, canned peaches, bolts of fabric stacked in uneven piles. Behind the counter stood Mr. Grady, sleeves rolled, spectacles low on his nose. He looked up, surprised for half a second, then careful. "Morning," Lila said. He nodded. "Ma'am." She stepped closer, placing her small ledger on the counter. The pages were filled in neat columns. Expenses, totals, every cent accounted for since she'd left her last town. "I'm looking for work," she said. "I can keep accounts." "Stock. Whatever you need done, I'll see it through." Grady glanced down at the ledger. His fingers hovered over it, but didn't touch. The door opened again. 3 women stepped in, skirts crisp despite the dust outside. The one in front, Mrs. Whitlock, didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The room seemed to make space for her without being asked. She looked at Lila first, then at the ledger. "That's so?" she said, quiet and even. Grady cleared his throat. "Just talking, Mrs. Whitlock. Nothing settled." Lila didn't turn. "I'm asking for work, not trouble." Mrs. Whitlock's gaze stayed on her a moment longer than necessary. Then she gave a small, almost polite smile. "Of course," she said. "And Mr. Grady runs his store as he sees fit." She shifted her attention to a sack of flour, as if the conversation had already ended. Grady nodded too quickly. "Come back this afternoon," he told Lila. "We'll see what can be done." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. Lila picked up her ledger. "Thank you," she said. When she stepped back into the street, the air felt heavier than before. By noon, the whispers had already started. At the water pump, outside the saloon, in the shade where folks pretended not to listen but always did. "She's asking for work, not from here. Didn't bring much with her, did she?" Lila walked past them all, head steady, steps even. She stopped only once, at the edge of the street where the lumberyard began. Colt was there again. He stood with one boot on a low beam, shaving a splintered edge with a small knife. He didn't look up when she passed, but the blade paused for just a second before moving again. That evening, she returned to the boarding house with a loaf of bread and a small packet of beans wrapped in paper, paid for in coins counted twice before handing them over. The hallway creaked as she climbed the stairs. The door to her room stood closed, same as she'd left it. She knew something was wrong before she even touched it. The latch felt loose. Inside, the window had been opened, just a crack. Enough for the curtain to stir. Her bag sat where she'd left it, but not the same. Lila crossed the room slowly. She knelt, untied the string, and reached inside. The contents had been shifted, folded wrong. Her hand moved, careful, until it found the seam in her dress hanging by the door. She pressed it. Still there. The book hadn't been found. Lila let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Outside, a board creaked. She moved to the window and looked down into the alley. A shadow slipped past the far wall and disappeared. For a long moment, she stood there, one hand on the sill, the other resting against the fabric where the book was hidden. Later, when the street had gone quieter, there was a knock. Not loud, just enough. Lila didn't answer right away. The knock came again. She opened the door a crack. No one stood there. Only a wooden bucket, filled halfway with water, sat on the floorboards. She looked down the hallway. Empty. From somewhere outside, a set of boots moved away across the dirt. Lila picked up the bucket and brought it inside. She set it beside the bed and dipped her fingers into the cool surface. The water trembled slightly. So did her hand. She sat back on the bed, listening to the quiet, to the faint sounds of the town settling into night. Someone had been looking for what she carried, and someone else had decided she shouldn't be left alone. The wind picked up again after dark, pressing against the thin walls. Lila lay down without undressing, one hand resting over the hidden seam, her eyes open long after the lantern went out. In the dark, the town felt closer than it should have, and whatever had followed her here had not yet finished. The next day came in hot and bright, like the night had never happened. Lila was already awake when the first wagon rattled past. She sat by the window, the tin cup in her hand, though the coffee inside had gone cold. The bucket of water sat near the bed, untouched except for a damp cloth folded over its edge. She didn't rush. She washed her face slowly, brushed the dust from her dress with careful strokes. When her fingers moved along the seam, they paused just long enough to feel the shape hidden beneath. Still there. Downstairs, the boarding house was louder than before. Chairs scraped. Someone laughed too loud. The kind of noise that comes when people want to be heard over something else. Lila stepped outside and felt it right away. Eyes again, but sharper now. By the time she reached Grady's store, two men stopped talking altogether as she passed. One of them turned just enough to watch her step through the door. The bell rang. Grady looked up, already uneasy. "You came back," he said. "You asked me to." He nodded, then rubbed a hand across the back of his neck. About that... The door opened behind her. Mrs. Whitlock entered again, this time with no pretense of shopping. She walked straight to the counter, her gloves still on despite the heat. "I heard you were reconsidering," she said. Grady swallowed. "Just thinking things through." Lila didn't turn. "He hasn't decided yet." Mrs. Whitlock's voice stayed calm. "There are decisions that don't belong to one man alone." The room felt smaller. Grady looked at the ledger in Lila's hands, then at the shelves, then at the floor. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I can't take on new help right now." It wasn't the words. It was how quickly they came. Lila nodded once, as if she had expected nothing else. She placed the ledger back into her bag, fingers steady. "Thank you for your time," she said. No one stopped her as she walked out. The sun hit harder than before. The street looked longer. She made it halfway across before the bag slipped from her shoulder. The strap caught on her sleeve, and everything inside spilled into the dust. Beans, a folded cloth, the small tin spoon she carried. She bent to gather it. A shadow fell across the ground beside her. Boots stepped into view. Colt Mercer didn't say anything. He crouched, picked up the tin spoon, brushed it once against his sleeve, and set it back in her hand. The others on the street went quiet. Lila reached for the bag, but it was already in his grip. He held it open while she placed the items back inside. His hands were steady, close, not touching unless they had to. When she lifted a small crate beside the store wall to clear space, it shifted wrong. The wood scraped. Her grip slipped. Colt's hand caught the edge before it fell. The crate steadied between them. For a second, neither moved. Then her fingers tightened. His didn't pull away. "Then I don't let go," he said, so low it barely carried past her shoulder. Lila glanced up. His face gave nothing. But his hand stayed where it was, holding the weight with hers. Someone down the street coughed. Another shifted in place. Colt lifted the crate the rest of the way and set it against the wall. He stepped back, wiping his palm against his pants like it had only been work. "Careful with that," he added, almost as an afterthought. Then he turned and walked toward the lumber yard. Lila stood there a moment longer than she meant to. That afternoon, she found herself back at the store anyway. Grady didn't look surprised this time. "I can't pay much," he said, not meeting her eyes. "But there's work needs doing. Stocking, cleaning." Lila set her bag down. "That's enough." Mrs. Whitlock was nowhere in sight. The work was simple. Shelves to straighten, sacks to move, numbers to keep in line. Lila moved through it without wasted motion. By late afternoon, the store looked different. Order where there had been clutter. Grady noticed. He didn't say much, but he didn't send her away either. Near sunset, clouds gathered low on the horizon. The air shifted. Cooler, but restless. By the time the first drop hit the ground, Lila was behind the store, stacking empty crates. The rain came fast, heavy, sudden. She ran for the nearest cover, the open side of the horse stall behind the saloon. Someone was already there. Colt stood with his back to one of the beams, hat pulled low, rain darkening the edges of his shirt. He didn't move when she stepped in, just shifted slightly, giving her space without looking at her directly. Water drummed against the roof, loud enough to fill the silence. For a while, neither spoke. Lila wrung the edge of her scarf, watching the drops fall from the fabric. "You followed me yesterday," she said finally. "No." "You were there." He tilted his head slightly. "So were you." That almost made her smile. The rain thickened, turning the alley to mud. "My husband died in a workyard," she said after a moment, voice steady. "They said a beam slipped. Wrong place, wrong time," Colt's jaw shifted once. Accidents happen, he said. That's what they told me. The rain hit harder. He looked out into it, not at her. Accidents, he said slowly, don't always happen the way folks say. Lila's hands stilled. You know something, she said. I know men who don't like being watched. The words settled heavy. She studied him then, really looked. The lines around his eyes. The way he held himself like he expected something to come from behind him at any moment. You worked for them, she said. He didn't answer. Didn't need to. The rain eased a little, but neither stepped out. For the first time since she'd arrived, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt shared. Lila leaned back against the beam, not close enough to touch, but close enough to hear his breathing under the sound of the rain. Neither of them moved away. Not yet. The rain slowed to a soft patter, tapping the edge of the roof like it was thinking about leaving. Water dripped from the beam between them, steady and slow. Lila pushed herself off the post first. I should get back, she said. Colt nodded once. Yeah. But neither stepped out into the rain right away. When they didn't walk together. Not close enough for anyone to say so. Just the same direction, a few paces apart, boots sinking slightly into the wet dirt. By morning, the storm had passed. The creek east of town ran louder than before, brown water pushing against the old wooden bridge. One side had shifted overnight. A beam sagged low, rope hanging loose where it had snapped. By noon, half the town had gathered. Men stood with hands on hips, staring like looking hard enough might fix it. Wagons waited on both sides, unable to cross. A woman argued about delayed flour. Someone blamed the county. Someone else said they'd send word. Lila stood near the edge, watching the current press against the supports. We can fix it, she said. No one answered. She stepped closer. If we cut timber from the north ridge, brace the posts here, and reset the footing. A laugh broke out behind her. You been here all of what, a week? A man said. Another voice joined. Bridge been standing longer than that. Lila didn't turn. And it's falling now. That got a few looks. Before anyone could answer, a horse stepped into the clearing. Hooves slow, controlled. Caleb Whitlock. He dismounted without hurry, dusting his coat like the mud might offend him. Mrs. Whitlock stood a few steps behind, eyes already fixed on Lila. Well now, Caleb said, glancing from the bridge to her. Seems we've got ourselves a planner. Silence shifted. Lila met his gaze. It needs fixing. He nodded, like he agreed, then his eyes dropped to her hands. And I suppose you've come prepared for that too. A man stepped forward. One of the same who'd been watching the store. I seen her with papers, he said. Numbers. Didn't look right. Lila felt it before it happened. The turn. Caleb tilted his head slightly. Is that so? The man nodded, too eager. Could be she's not what she says. The words hung there. Lila didn't move. You can look, she said. Everything I have is mine. Caleb smiled faintly. I'm sure it is. No one stepped forward to check. They didn't need to. The doubt had already done its work. For a moment, it felt like the ground shifted under her the same way the bridge had. Then boots moved beside her. Colt stepped forward. Not fast, not loud. He didn't look at Caleb. Didn't look at the crowd. He looked at her. Then he reached out. His hand closed around hers. Firm. Warm. No hesitation. A ripple moved through the people gathered. Not loud. But enough. If she goes, Colt said, voice steady, carrying just enough. I go. No one laughed this time. Caleb's smile thinned. That's so. Colt didn't answer. He didn't need to. Grady shifted near the back, cleared his throat. Bridge still needs fixing. Hank, the blacksmith, spat to the side. Timber's not going to haul itself. One by one, heads turned away from the argument and back toward the broken wood. It wasn't agreement, but it wasn't rejection either. Colt's hand didn't leave hers right away. When it did, it was slow. Work started that afternoon. Axes struck wood up on the ridge. The sound carried down through the dry air, steady as a heartbeat. Men hauled beams, rope pulled tight, nails hammered in with sharp, echoing cracks. Lila moved where she was needed, counting lengths, holding lines, carrying what she could. No one thanked her, but no one told her to leave. Once, as she lifted one end of a beam, the weight shifted wrong. Her grip faltered. Colt was there before it dropped. Their shoulders touched. Just for a second. Neither pulled away. By evening, the frame of the bridge stood straighter than before. The sky burned low and orange. Smoke from a small fire curled upward near the creek bank. They sat there after the others drifted off. Not close, not far. Lila rubbed her hands together, watching the ash settle in the flames. I'll leave, she said after a while. Colt didn't look up. You could. I should. He picked up a small stick, pressed it into the fire, shifting a coal. Sparks rose, then settled again. You always do what you should? He asked. Lila didn't answer. The silence stretched. Then she stood. Colt did too. For a moment they just faced each other, close enough to see the dust still caught along the line of his collar, close enough to hear the last of the creek running under the bridge. Lila's hand moved first, just a little, then stopped. Colt closed the space. Not fast, not forced. His hand found hers again. He didn't speak. Neither did she. The kiss wasn't sudden. It didn't rush. It stayed. Like something both of them had already decided on, long before that moment. When it ended, neither stepped back right away. The fire cracked once behind them. Somewhere down the road, a horse shifted its weight. The town was still there, watching, waiting. But for that moment, it didn't reach them. Not yet. By morning, the bridge stood half-finished under a pale sky. The creek had settled some, but the current still pressed hard against the posts, testing what had been built the day before. Lila arrived early. The ground was damp where the fire had burned down to ash. A hammer lay where someone had left it. A coil of rope rested near the edge, still wet from the night air. She bent to pick it up, fingers brushing along the fibers, checking for frays. Habit. Care. From the far side, a wagon approached, wheels crunching slow. The driver didn't stop, just looked once, then turned away, taking the long road instead. Work resumed before the sun climbed high. Hank brought nails. Grady came with a crate of tools he didn't say he'd loaned. A few others joined, not speaking much, but staying. Colt worked near the center span, setting a beam into place. His movements were steady, precise, like he'd done this more times than he cared to remember. Lila moved along the edge, counting, measuring, calling out distances when asked, and sometimes when not. No one argued. By midday, the bridge looked closer to whole. That's when the smell came. Sharp, wrong. Smoke. It started low, near the far post where the supports met the bank. A thin line at first, then thicker. Fire! Someone shouted. Men ran, buckets lifted, Water thrown, but the flames caught fast, licking along the dry wood where the beam hadn't yet been set. Smoke rose in a dark column, twisting against the bright sky. Lila didn't move at first. She just stared. Then she saw it. Oil. Dark stains along the base. Fresh. This wasn't the storm's doing. Colt reached the edge, kicking dirt against the flame, forcing it back from the center. Others followed. The fire fought, then faltered, then died under the weight of water and mud. What remained was blackened wood, half the work undone. Silence settled heavier than before. No one spoke. No one needed to. Lila stepped forward slowly, boots sinking into the damp soil. Her eyes moved over the damage, then past it, to the edge of the bank where the dirt had been disturbed. Tracks. Not from a wagon. From a single horse. She turned. Caleb Whitlock stood at the far edge of the crowd, hands resting easy at his sides, like he had come to witness nothing more than misfortune. His eyes met hers. Just for a second. Then he looked away. That was enough. Lila reached into her dress. The seam tore easier this time. The small leather book slid into her hand. The movement drew eyes. She walked to the center of the clearing, dust still clinging to her boots, smoke drifting past her shoulder. "I know who did this," she said. No one interrupted. She opened the book. Her voice didn't rise, didn't shake. She read. Numbers, dates, deliveries marked twice, payments that never matched the goods that arrived, names tied to shipments that never reached town. Each word landed like a quiet weight. Grady frowned. Hank shifted closer. Someone behind them muttered, then stopped. Lila turned a page. Timber orders delayed, she read. Bridge materials held. Price increased after shortage. The pattern showed itself without her saying it. Caleb stepped forward. That's enough. Lila didn't look at him. Men paid to look the other way, she continued. Accidents reported where there were none. The word hung there. Accidents. Colt's hand tightened at his side. Caleb's voice sharpened. You're making claims you can't prove. Lila closed the book. Then, for the first time, she looked straight at him. My husband worked one of your sites, she said. A shift moved through the crowd. He wrote this, she added, lifting the book slightly. Before he died. No one spoke. Caleb's jaw set. You should be careful with stories like that. I am, Lila said. She held his gaze, didn't look away. For a moment it felt like the whole town leaned in, waiting for something to break. Caleb turned first. He stepped back, brushing dust from his coat like he'd done the day before. We'll see what the sheriff says, he said. Then he moved to his horse. Colt stepped into his path. Not fast, not loud, just there. He didn't touch him, didn't raise a hand. He stood. That was enough. Caleb paused, looked at him, then around. The crowd wasn't the same as it had been. Not quite. He mounted without another word and rode out, dust rising behind him. No one stopped him. Not yet. But something had shifted. Lila stood where she was, the book still in her hand. The smoke thinned. The air cleared. Slowly, people moved again. Hank picked up a hammer. Grady wiped his hands on his apron. Someone brought fresh boards. Work started again. Not louder, just steadier. By evening, the bridge stood upright once more. Not finished, but holding. Lila stood at the edge, looking out over the water as it passed beneath the boards. She didn't hear Colt come up beside her. You could leave, he said. She nodded. I could. You won't. It wasn't a question. Lila let out a slow breath. "No," she said. He reached out. Didn't grab. Didn't pull. Just let his hand rest open between them. For a moment she looked at it. Then she stepped forward. Past him. 2 steps. 3. Her boots touched the first plank of the bridge. She stopped. The wind moved through the dry grass beyond the creek. Lila turned. Colt hadn't moved, still standing where she left him, waiting. She walked back, slow, certain. And this time, when she placed her hand in his, she didn't pull away. The boards beneath them creaked once as they stood together. The bridge held. So did they. And if you stand there long enough, you can almost feel it. The weight of that moment. The boards under your feet, still rough from fresh cuts. The sound of water moving below. Steady, patient. The kind of sound that doesn't ask anything from you, but reminds you what it means to keep going. Now imagine it's your hand in his. Not perfect, not promised. Just there. Offered without force. Waiting without demand. Would you take it? Because sometimes, life doesn't give you a clean road. It gives you dust, doubt, and people who decide who you are before you even speak. And sometimes, it gives you one person who doesn't turn away. Not loudly, not proudly. Just quietly, staying. That kind of love doesn't fix everything, but it holds. And maybe that's enough. Maybe healing doesn't come all at once. Maybe it comes in small things, like someone standing beside you when it would be easier to step back. Like choosing to stay even when leaving feels safer. If you've ever had to make that choice, or if you're still standing at the edge of it, tell me where you are in that moment. There are more stories like this waiting. Stories about people who carry quiet strength, who find something real in the middle of hard places. If this one stayed with you, you'll feel at home in the next one too.